of this presentation. And Stacy is now recording for today. But we're so excited to be a part of these presentations and a part of just sharing information about competitive integrated employment and how to access employment and how to maintain that employment once you get that employment in the community. So Stacy, thank you for including us, and I'm looking forward to hearing the information that's shared today.
Great, thanks, Kim. So glad you reminded me to record there so we can share it with everyone. And also all the slides that the presenters have created, those will also be available for you on the Partners Graduate page, which is private. It's only for Partners graduates. As you all know, you have to have a password in order to access that page. All of that will be we're going to create just one page that will have the slides and the recordings available for our Partners graduates. Also wanted to remind you all, on that Partners page, the application is open for the class of 2024. So if any of you have friends who you think would be a great participant in the Partners in Policymaking program, please send, I'm going to drop the link in the chat here, and please send them our way. And anything you can do to tell them how great the program is, how much you've learned from it, the connections and friends that you made. Please be sure to share that far and wide. Remember, it's for adults who have an intellectual or developmental disability, as well as families, parents who have a young child under 14 with an intellectual or developmental disability. And part of the reason we ask for the children to have a younger age is we're trying to build this coalition of change makers and have them start early in the process, early in their lives. So please be sure to share that application link far and wide. And I just want to recap from yesterday. Are there anyone who was on the call yesterday? Is there anyone who has any questions that they want to drop in the chat, or anything that wasn't answered that maybe you thought about overnight and I really wish I knew the answer to that, so that we can be sure to get those responses when we send stuff out? So just real quick, opening it up, if there's anything, just feel free to drop it in the chat or the Q&A. If you just want to send it to us privately, that is absolutely fine too. So Kim, what do you think? Can we start 4 minutes early with Jessica, since we've got everyone on and ready to go?
Jessica, what do you think? Are you ready to go?
I think that sounds great. I am ready.
Awesome.
Great. All right. Well, Kim, if you want to go ahead and introduce Jessica, Jessie or Jessica?
I actually go by Jessie, but either way is fine.
Perfect.
I just trick everyone by putting Jessica in my name.
Great. All right. Go for it, Kim.
Jessie and I did not talk about this necessarily, but Jessie is with ICI, Institute for Community Inclusion, and she is going to share information with us today about waiver services, DMH and DD support services, and waiver services. Is that correct?
That is correct. And thank you. I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm really excited to talk with all of you. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if that's okay. Okay, so if you at any time can't hear me, let me know. But as Kim said, thank you for the introduction. And as Kim said, I am with the Institute for Community Inclusion, and I'm specifically with Employment First Missouri. And we're a collaboration with the Missouri Division of Developmental Disabilities. You got to meet my colleague Leslie Quarles yesterday, and she came and she shared with you about waiver employment services. Our initiative, we really work to increase the capacity and increase opportunities for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities across the state. We primarily do that by providing training and consulting for providers. But today, what I want to talk to you about is, as Kim and Stacy had mentioned, I really want to focus on those Medicaid waiver support services that can benefit the employment journey. So as you heard from Leslie yesterday about the employment services specifically, the ones I'm going to talk about today are not specifically employment services, but we recognize that sometimes people need to participate in additional services to really benefit from those employment services. Or as Kim mentioned, they can help sustain employment, and sometimes they can help support that employment as a long-term goal. So I want to start by just talking about, we're really focusing on the whole person and really focusing on what is a meaningful day and a good life for people. And in doing that, we're really recognizing that employment isn't, or it shouldn't have to be, an either or choice. We don't want people feeling like when they are choosing about going to work that they're having to make a choice between that and other services. We recognize that not everyone's working full time, and wanting to make sure that people are able to spend that time that they're not working in really meaningful ways. Also recognizing that sometimes additional services help support that meaningful day. And then also recognizing that everyone is not necessarily wanting to work right now, and that we still, a lot of times we can focus on some services right now that can support employment down the road as a longer term goal, or even if someone's in that kind of decision making where they're deciding, do I want to work or not, there might be some sort of services that can support that decision. So those are really the services that I'm going to focus on today when I talk with you. We look at community membership as a lifelong journey. And so it's not just starting and ending with employment. We recognize that sometimes people are really wanting to develop some skills, either before they're going to work, or maybe they're working and they're still focusing on that skill development. We know that's not something that ends. And then, sometimes we see people choosing to volunteer. And also, again, it doesn't have to be an either or. We see people sometimes in employment and volunteering both. And then really building those community relationships and networks. So recognizing that we know how important those networks are for people when they go to work. We know that that's really important for people to have those community connections and build social capital, and that can really help them in their employment pathway. And then also meaningful retirement activities. When someone retires, their life goals aren't stopping. We know that they still probably want to spend their day in ways that are meaningful to them and purposeful. And so looking at activities that can support that phase of life as well. So really this uses a person-centered planning process and a person-centered planning team. If someone has a support coordinator, which we know not everyone is going to have a support coordinator, but for those people who do, the support coordinator would be a part of that planning team. And then often the planning team is going to involve family members, it could be friends, it could be community members, it could be other professionals. It could be vocational rehabilitation counselors, school personnel. It could be a whole host of people. And really, who makes up that support team is really driven by the individual. We always are trying to encourage the individual to have as much choice and to drive that process as much as possible, and use as much self-determination as possible. And that team really will come together and figure out what the individual's goals are, and then what services will help achieve those goals. And then generally with the services I'm talking about today, that team would connect the individual to service providers who actually provide that service. But again, this is going to be really much based on the individual's choice and ensuring that the individual has the chance to select the providers that they want to work with and the services that they want to participate in. So this could include services outside of waiver services that I'm talking about today. It could be, for example, someone being referred to vocational rehabilitation. It could be maybe their local school district or library has some classes that they're referred to. So it could be community resources. It's really, again, looking at the whole person and then that whole community mapping and seeing what's available to help them in achieving their goals. So really, it's individualized and person-centered. And the reason I especially want to bring that up is because not all of the services are going to look the same for everyone, and they really shouldn't. So it really should be tied to that individual's interests and preference and strengths, and specifically their goals that they want to achieve. And then that team looking at the situation saying, okay, what barriers are existing here that might stop them from achieving that goal? And are there services that could address these barriers? Or maybe they're community resources, but what resources and services are out there that could help address these barriers? So these are the services that I'm going to mention today. And I just want to stop for a second and say, there's not a lot of time to go into a whole lot of detail about each of these services. And again, they're all going to be individualized. Not everyone would have all these services or have a need for all of these services, but we just wanted to let you know that they are there and that they can support that employment journey and that sustainability with employment. And so if you do need more information, my contact information is at the end on the last slide. I am really happy to have more conversation about this, give you more information, or connect you with someone who can help provide additional information about this. Also, if you have a support coordinator, that's a great person to talk to, and then local regional offices as well. And I'll have that information. I'll have that local regional office information at the end slide too. So those services that I'm going to discuss today are individualized skill development, personal attendant, community networking, day habilitation, benefits planning, transportation, and assistive technology. And we'll go through each of those in a little bit of detail. The individualized skill development, this is developing skills and supporting individuals who live in their own or family homes to build and maintain complex skills for independence. So some examples of what we see here is maybe helping someone develop skills to maintain their home, working with someone to develop a budget, or using the service to learn how to use public transportation. And you can see how a lot of those would support employment. The example I have here is we have a person who is using individualized skill development to learn how to use public transportation because they want to go to work, and this will increase their access to a bigger range of jobs in their area. Okay. We have personal attendance skills, and this is assistance for daily activities of life. And then this enables people to complete tasks that they're not able to do due to a disability. And really the focus in here is on ensuring that people can participate fully in their home and community life. So our example here is using personal attendant services for assistance eating and toileting in the community. So you can see how that's allowing someone to participate fully in that community activity. The next one is community networking. And this is really focused on helping people and supporting people to develop relationships in the community. But it is very purposeful. So it really should be tied to their interests, their preference, their gifts, their strengths, and their overall goals. So it should not be a one-size-fits-all approach. It definitely should be something that's tied very specifically to that individual. So in this example, we have someone who's using community networking to participate in a community club to increase their social network and develop relationships. And as I mentioned earlier, we know that having social capital, which is just those relationships and those networks that you have in the community, is really key when someone does want to go to work. Those relationships can make a big difference in how they're able to network and connect with potential employers and businesses and community. Rehabilitation, this is to acquire, improve, and retain self-help, socialization, and adaptive skills that enhance social development and develop skills in performing activities of daily living and community living. So rehabilitation is not actually going to be providing employment services in a rehabilitation setting. It says very specifically there they may not provide services that are vocational in nature. However, how we can see this supporting employment is that if someone wants to work part-time and they want to spend that time that they're not working, still working towards their goals, still developing these skills, what we see sometimes is that people will select to spend their non-working time at rehabilitation services, still working towards those life goals and still developing those skills. Benefits planning. I know Leslie discussed this yesterday, but it was worth coming back to and talking about again because it relates very strongly. It definitely supports employment planning. Benefits planning lets someone really understand how going to work will impact their benefit. And it lets them also explore what work incentives might be out there to really help them maximize that financial income that's coming in, and understanding if working is going to result in increased economic self-sufficiency. And so an example here would be, we have someone who wants to go to work and maybe they're in career planning, as Leslie discussed yesterday, exploring, and they're determining how many hours they want to work, what kind of wages they're looking for, what kind of job they want to do. And they might use benefits planning services to help them understand how that would impact their benefits and make those decisions based on really accurate information and have a really solid plan in place. Transportation, when necessary, it can be used to access waiver and other community services, activities, and resources. And these should be, again, very specifically tied to a support plan. And so with a transportation service.
Oh, Jessica, it seems like you paused for just 1 second, and transportation is just one of the biggest issues we deal with. Would you mind just repeating that? Maybe it's just mine that froze, but I'm interested too. If you wouldn't mind just repeating that slide, please.
Absolutely. And I actually did just get something saying my internet was unstable, so it may have been everyone. Okay, so transportation can be used when it's necessary to access waiver and other community services, activities, and resources specified by a support plan. And so for the example, you could have someone who is working and they are using a DD waiver transportation service provider to provide that transportation service back and forth to work. Did it work that time, Stacy?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And assistive technology. So this is going to be technology that is very specific to addressing someone's needs and outcomes that have been identified in the plan. And this is going to be for maintaining and improving independence, functional capabilities, vocational skills, or community involvement. So the example we have here is someone is working and they use assistive technology services to purchase an iPad and some apps to be more independent on the job. We are seeing some really exciting uses of technology to really increase independence at work, in the community, in people's homes. And so that is a great example of a service that can support that employment journey. And that is all the services that I have to discuss. But as I said, I know I went through those pretty quickly and there's not a lot of detail in there. So again, please feel welcome to reach out to me if you want more information. My contact information will be on the next slide. But then also here are some additional resources where you can go and just get a whole lot more information. There's some general information for individuals and families, and that just covers all of the Division of Developmental Disabilities services and resources, the map of local regional offices. If you don't have a support coordinator and you are wanting to learn more about the services and eligibility and how someone can access them, that is a great place to start and ask those questions. And then navigating the DD system is an infographic that just visually shows what that process looks like. And promoting employment will link to the division's employment services as well as employment resources.
Great. Well, thank you, Jessie. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. I was going to say, here's my contact information. Please feel welcome to reach out to me either by phone or email. And so by email, it's jessica.keenoy, it's KEENOY @umb.edu. And phone is 573-303-8770.
What does the UMB stand for?
So Institute for Community Inclusion is actually at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. So UMB stands for University of Massachusetts, Boston.
I could not figure that out. Okay.
Yeah.
Very
good. It's a little tricky because people think I live in Boston and I don't.
Well, we're glad you're here in Missouri with us, Jessie. So you do have a couple questions that came up in the chat. If you can take a peek, we have 8 minutes till our next speaker comes on. Someone asked, does DMH have curriculum for the skills development, or at least list the types of skills and individual needs in each area, like budgeting, using a debit card, using a link card, using a credit card, using their benefits?
That is a really good question. I do not think that there's a curriculum, but let me write this question down and then follow back up with you on that, because I do think when we look at the waiver definition, there are examples that I might also be able to find more details there, if that's okay.
Yeah, I can email it to you.
Oh, that would be wonderful. And I will get you a solid answer for that.
Great. And then Luke had another question. He said, how can we ensure transportation when public providers keep cutting routes? Metro recently reduced routes due to a driver shortage. Many times the bus is a no-show, meaning it never arrived at a stop by scheduled time.
Luke, I know that that can be frustrating, and I know transportation, it seems like that is something that comes up whether we are in really metro areas, really rural areas. Let's see, again, I'd love to have a kind of a follow-up conversation about that. But one of the things is we definitely encourage people to really look at your region and the resources in your region and get creative sometimes too about transportation. A lot of times we're looking at our own personal networks, and then there are also ways to get involved and have your voice heard too. I think one of the things I've learned about working with transportation is that they really want to hear from people about people's needs and about people's concerns about it. And so, you know, are there places that your voice can be heard to kind of emphasize that need for transportation? We really like to see people get involved and advocate for themselves in transportation. But I'm happy to have a follow-up conversation about that. If you're looking for some places that maybe some places that you can advocate for transportation. And then there's also some great transportation resources out there that, again, Stacey, I could send to you by email that could be shared with the group.
Oh, that would be great. I can put it in the follow-up. And I mean, Jesse, not to put you on the spot, but that is one of the biggest things that we hear about, is that people need help with transportation, and especially in the rural areas. But I mean, even in the urban areas, you know, St. Louis is that's where I'm from, is even really having trouble, like Luke said, getting drivers that, because they're retiring because of age, or they're worried about making more money, too much money and losing benefits. A lot of the cars and buses are old. So there's a lot that needs to be done with transportation. And it's definitely one of the biggest issues that we all struggle with. And Essence asks, is this transportation for children or just young adults?
That is also a good question. The transportation that as far as like coming from someone who is using it for work, would probably be someone working age, but let me get an answer to that as well too, because the waiver services do cover the whole lifespan. So let me get an answer to that as well. Sorry, I'm gonna have to email you responses for all of these.
Oh, Jesse, I think it's great. And that I'm telling you, the partners, the graduates of Partners in Policymaking, and some of our current ones, they stumped me with these great questions as well. And you are not alone in like, how are we going to solve this transportation crisis? Because it really, and it's not just Missouri, it really is all over the country, that we're having issues with transportation. Can the transportation waivers be used for like Uber and Lyft and things like that, like the ride shares?
So I believe that in the services that we're talking about here, in the way they are, you'd be writing with a waiver, someone who has a service provider who has a contract to provide DD waiver transportation services. So in that case, it would not be.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. And I am not seeing any more questions, but Jesse, thank you for all of that great information, and glad to know that you're here in Missouri with us, so that we have your contact information and can reach out if more questions come up. And yeah, we're not sending out the summary of everything until next week, but if you have any resources that would be helpful to share, that would be great to include in any follow-up if you have time.
Absolutely, I do, and I will get those questions answered and back to you.
Great. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much. I'm so happy.
Day.
Yep. Thank you all for having me here today.
Right. Great. Well, good questions, everyone. And I'm excited to introduce our next presenter. We have Shireen Razavi coming up, and she is with Boone County Family Resource Center. And Shireen is part of one of the SB 40 boards. So Shireen, anything else you want to let us know about with your background? And before you get started, welcome. Thanks so much for coming here. You can go ahead and unmute yourself and introduce yourself.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Shireen Razavi. I work with Boone County Family Resources. We provide county-based case management here in Boone County, which is Columbia, Missouri, and the surrounding towns that are incorporated in Boone County. So we contract with the Department of Mental Health, Division of Developmental Disabilities, to provide county-based services. So I'm going to put out there in advance, I know a lot about Boone County. I may not know as much about specific services outside of Boone County. But hopefully some of the information I'm going to share today will be helpful to everyone. I tried to keep it a little bit broad. In terms of my background, I actually have a lot of appreciation for people who go through Partners in Policymaking and Advocacy. My first job in college was working for a local parent advocate in Springfield, Missouri, who I did respite for 4 years, who had a daughter with severe behaviors and autism, and she helped get a lot of services going in the Springfield area at the time. So that kind of sparked my interest in this field, was actually kind of working with a parent advocate. So from there, I've worked at BCFR for 25 years, and our teams are kind of divided by age groups. So my team specifically of case managers or support coordinators, we call them, really highly focuses on middle school through early adulthood and that transition into planning for what comes next, including pre-vocational skills and employment and getting ready for employment and what all of that looks like afterwards. I do a lot of collaboration with Columbia Public Schools on their vocational programs, and we work together and have had a lot of joint programs trying to get high schoolers ready for an integrated competitive employment. And I often sit in on their work program interviews. So I've been doing that for over 10 years. So the teens and early adults are kind of the area that is my expertise. So that's a little bit about me. I'm going to share screen now, and I will share my presentation with you guys. So I'm going to go through just sort of what the role of a support coordinator could be for you as an individual or a family. So some of this sounds like was kind of discussed in the previous presentation, but some of the things that a support coordinator can assist you with thinking about are what skills you might need for successful employment and brainstorming in advance how we might develop the skills that might be needed. So if there's an area where we know that might be an obstacle, are there some services or supports we can put in place early in middle school, high school that families and teams can be thinking of to get ready for successful employment afterwards? So we use the person-centered planning process to identify strengths and help think about what might be a good potential job preference. We can help link with some of these pre-vocational training skills programs that are available through DMH. Here in Boone County, we also have some specific job training programs that are available through our agency. So we would be the connector to Medicaid Waiver Services through DMH that's been kind of discussed a few times. Here in Boone County, we also have some unique agreements with the CARE program that does some job-based placement for teens. And then we also have a program here within our agency called Life and Work Connections, where we do independent skills training, and we do some pre-employment training as well as job placement. We can help with linking to vocational rehabilitation. And then we can also work with that team once you're connected with VR to identify what other resources or supports might be needed to help with employment, such as transportation. I don't have the magic answer for transportation either. Unfortunately, it's an obstacle in our town. There are some things that we try to do, like investigate if paratransit is an option, and our support coordinators will help individuals walk through that process of getting eligible for paratransit and some things like that. We can also attend any follow-up meetings with the team to talk about if a concern comes up during the course of employment, how might we brainstorm together to figure out some potential solutions. Thinking about family role when we're working as a team for supporting successful employment outcomes, I always like to say start as early as possible. So I'm excited to hear there's some younger families potentially on this webinar. Thinking about things that may not seem like a big deal around your home, but actually do lend themselves to successful employment outcomes. Things like working on chores, thinking about at what point might my child be able to be home alone safely, if that's a possibility, and how can I kind of baby step into increasing that alone time learning how to advocate for yourself. How do you make choices? How do you be safe? Those are all skills that you need when you're going to go have a job out in the community. So if families can start young, having expectations for independence as much as possible and as much as safe, and having expectations related to chores and things like that, we do see a lot more success with employment. Educate yourselves about what supports are available. So it's great that you're on this webinar related to employment. I think sometimes there may be a thought that if someone has a para with them all the time at school, that maybe that translates into integrated employment, but really that level of support isn't always available. So just kind of thinking about that. And then being open with the team about what, if you're supporting someone who's trying to get employment going, what are your family barriers and what are the potential strengths that might be things that the team can work with or that we need to address or try to overcome. And just also thinking about how would employment fit into your family life and daily schedule, because if you're going to have to potentially transport or something like that, how would it work? And just kind of being mindful that the same expectations an employer has of you are going to be the same expectations they have of your child when they seek employment. Individual roles, we like to say, get familiar with your strengths and preferences. So that will help guide the team and where to help, find employment and what we can do to best support you. Explore what types of jobs you might be interested in. Look around when you're out in the community, see what people are doing. You can ask questions, find out about different, and that might help spark ideas about where you might want to work. And then thinking too about what type of work environment suits you, because sometimes people are placed in jobs that are maybe too noisy or too loud. It's little things like that that can really make a difference. So even knowing, do I like a quiet work environment, a busy work environment, a loud work environment? Those are all good things for the team to know. And then don't give up. So sometimes it's easy, like if the first or second job doesn't work out, to get discouraged, but that's okay. None of us stay with our first or second job. Sometimes those are good ways for for yourself and for your team to figure out, okay, maybe that wasn't the best job match, but now we know from this experience, these are things that might lead to a better job outcome for the next job that you're looking for. So I worked with, there's a program through the university called TIPS on a transition kind of project for families. We're going to share this resource information and for our support coordinators for thinking about employment. So I just thought I would share some of these resource tools that we developed for our SCs who are trying to learn more about transition and employment, as well as for families and individuals that we'll share with. So this is just sort of a slide to think about. If you're thinking about a job, what are some of the different categories that you might want to think about? So taking responsibility, and how can you start to prepare by taking some classes and learning about how to interview. Some of these are BCFR specific or Boone County specific, but talking to experts about employment like voc rehab. And then, like I kind of mentioned, looking at what your personal interests may be. We also are using the life course Nexus kind of stuff to think about employment. So this is something that actually we kind of came up internally. On the life course website, there are some other trajectories. These are planning tools to help the team think about person-centered planning. We use this trajectory a lot here at BCFR annually with families. So it's kind of thinking about where do you want to get to. And then this line here is to think about, okay, if my ultimate goal is a job, what are some things that I need to develop to get to that outcome? So this is something that we were kind of thinking about, and it's something that you can use as an individual or family in your own life of, okay, if my ultimate goal is a job, what kinds of skills might I need? What types of support might I need to get there? So these are just some examples of, I worked with our Life and Work Connections work program supervisor. These are some of the things she identified that are good skills to have in order to reach successful employment. This is another kind of life course tool that's available on their website, which will be linked. The link is at the end of my presentation. this is another way of kind of thinking about employment and resources around how to obtain successful employment. So there are different categories that they've kind of developed through Life Course that help you kind of piece out, not everything may be paid DMH services or paid VR services. What are those other things in an individual's life or in the community or technology now that might lend itself to successful employment? So you can kind of see here, it gets into what are your personal strengths. So each individual can kind of think about that. What kinds of relationships does that person have that might support a successful employment outcome? And then what kinds of technology, there's all sorts of cool technology out there, might help keep someone on track with employment. And then what are the community-based resources that just anybody in the community could access? And then there's also a category there for what types of eligibility specific things might lend themselves to developing social skills or developing independent living skills or work skills that would lead towards competitive employment. So these are just some ideas of ways that if you're thinking about employment, you can use these tools, take it to your plan meetings if you're working with a case manager to kind of talk through how we get to next steps. This is another kind of tool that our agency developed, just thinking about employment. And then the TIPS program through the university, the students there helped us develop. So these are just sort of, again, kind of tying back to Life Course, those person-centered planning thoughts about kind of looking at everything in totality, not just sort of funded services, because we all know there are provider shortages and turnover and all that. So what are the other things that we need to be thinking about related to resources that might help get to successful employment? And then these are kind of action sheets that individuals could take to a planning meeting with their team, with VR, with their support coordinator. Just helping to frame up the conversation so that it's focused on what you want, what your goals are, what your priorities are. And so that kind of keeps the team on track and helps kind of organize everybody's thoughts about who's doing what at the end of the meeting. I know sometimes there can be meetings and lots of thoughts and lots of things, and it can be overwhelming at the end, like what did we decide, who's doing what? So this is kind of a tool that you can use to think about what do you want, why do you want it in terms of, and what kind of obstacles might there be, what resources, then how the individual or family next steps, and then the SC next steps. But this could be applicable to any team members that you're working with if you don't have a case manager through DMH or through a county board. And this is, again, another kind of planning tool that you guys could use when thinking about how to organize your thoughts around employment and who's going to do what and next steps. I included in here a map of the regional office. They are how you get connected with the Senate Bill 40 board if you're looking to get connected with case management. So they're the point of intake, and once intake and eligibility is established through the regional office, individuals are transferred to the local county board for case management. So this is just to give you an idea about those types of supports or how you would get connected. And then this is kind of the end of my presentation. Here are some references related to the things that I discussed. So I'll link to our agency website, BCFR, the DMHDD website, our MACDDS website. And then if you're interested in learning more about some of these person-centered planning tools that I showed you some examples of, the Life Course website is full of additional information and tools that you can use to take to your team to say, hey, here's a little bit about me and what I would like to work on and so it might help kind of keep the focus on you and what your goals are. And that is all I had. Does anybody have any questions?
Shireen, that was great. I think that we all want you to be our support coordinator.
We're actually trying to train up more of our SCs as we grow. So we're actually doing an in-house transition training next month, and we're going to have Columbia Public Schools, their transition coordinator come and VR come. And then we have a couple of SCs that are really versed in transition and employment that are going to do some case studies. Another thing I'd like to mention, kind of thinking about employment, and if you have a case manager, a lot of times I think teams are so focused on employment, they don't think about what about that in between time. So you may need a waiver, even if your goal is integrated employment, for maybe you're only working 10 hours a week and you might want to need something else to fill your time. So a lot of people go from a full school day and then they think, oh, I'm going to have a job, and maybe you do get a job, but there's a lot of downtime in between, and that can create a lot of stress on families and individuals going from a full day of activity to maybe a job that isn't quite that amount of hours. So your SC can hopefully help you develop kind of a plan that will address all of that in terms of what would you do? Do you want to do SDSPA? Do you want to do, is day hab appropriate, to kind of fill in those gaps of maybe structure and supervision so that we don't see a lot of regression after, losing of skills if you're kind of in between jobs or still looking for a job, or your job doesn't have the hours that you want. So we're here to kind of help brainstorm kind of all of that in addition to your, how to get a job. What about that in between time can really become a barrier that people don't think about.
Well, and when we talk about volunteering, I think that's great because you're getting skills and meeting people, getting contacts. It's something else to add to your resume. So that could be something people are also doing while they're even trying to get the other stuff done. So Luke had a great question. Can we get a list of all the SB 40 boards by region and St. Louis, Columbia, Kansas City? And I think you had the map up there.
I have the map of the regional offices, and then I did put a link here to the MACDDS or website, sorry. And this has all the county member boards. I don't know if this link will take me there right now, but this will, that might have taken you away from share screen.
No, but if you could throw that in the chat, that would be great. Now everyone will get these slides, but that would be great. Just while Luke's thinking about it, so he has it.
Yeah. So that last page there of my presentation will take you directly to the participating county boards. Like I said, every county board does things a little bit differently. In Boone County, we do serve all ages from birth up to the elderly. So we start with, and it doesn't matter in our county if you have Medicaid or not. So we work with all individuals. But not every county is that way. So you just have to kind of check and see what's available in your county.
Okay. And I love that. I think it was green and white, that little sheet that you had where you said when you're like in the meeting with the schools of kind of like, hey, whose next step is what? So they'll be able to get that when they have your presentation. And then there was a question, what is SDSDA?
Was that my SDSDA? Let me go back to my presentation. Was that in my, I don't recall where that was in my presentation.
Nicole, do you have any other background on that to remind us where that came from? We talked about this yesterday. There are, so you said at the end of, I think you said MACDDS.
Oh, so that is the kind of organization that association for all the county boards, for all the Senate Bill 40 boards. So they have an association, which will be linked on the last page of my presentation. But that county board association, they all meet quarterly and coordinate. A lot of them are the ones that you can see on that website what types of services they provide. So MACDDS is the County Board Association for the Senate Bill 40 boards.
And when we say Senate Bill 40 boards, there was legislation in Missouri
Yeah.
that passed that said a certain amount of taxes will go towards these SB 40 boards.
Yeah, so Senate Bill 40 is the actual Senate Bill 40 that passed many years ago, that allowed counties to establish services for individuals with developmental disabilities. So I think the original iteration of that, it was like a lot of workshops and group homes maybe. And since then, you know, those things may still be things that are provided depending on your county, but a lot of counties are now contracting to provide county-based case management, as the regional offices have kind of gotten out of that. So each county, I think, has the ability to set up kind of a property tax request for that county. So I know in our county, I believe at least twice in our history, we've gone back to kind of ask the voters of Boone County, will you pay this percentage of a property tax towards DD services? So that's how it works. In terms of funding. And then we, you know, have contracts with DMH and things like that and do all the, but yeah. So the county boards, depending on where you're at, they have different functions, but their original function was created so many years ago that a lot of the services may have been not case management, but actual direct service delivery. But things have kind of evolved over time so that and Boone County was one of the first counties to do county-based case management. We were kind of part of the pilot to, with the idea that, you know, county-based services, you can create more collaborations and more people get to know each other better on a county level than when you're trying to cover a 10-county area. So that really does help, like with our relationship with the schools. I can just contact the transition director if I have a question, and we can try to work together. We've been able to create some cool senior work programs and different things like that, pulling in VR and BCFR in the schools, being able to be kind of a county-based organization versus covering a huge geographic area.
Well, Shireen, as I'm a Boone County resident, so you know we definitely appreciate all that you do. Thank you for your information, great presentation, and I know everyone will look forward to getting those slides and all the resources that you included. Thank you. All right,
Thanks for having me.
See you next time.
Bye.
All right, so next up, we're going to hear from Laura Miller about some resources from social services. So, Laura, we are ready for you.
How are you?
Great. How are you doing today? Oh, and Shireen, you can go ahead and stop share. All right, Laura, you're up.
All right. I'm doing well. I'm going to apologize for looking like a drowned rat. We had a open house and ribbon cutting for our local community college. Just had a new, it's very nice, very fancy technology and innovation center. So I've been outside in the hottest part of the day on asphalt. So just forgive me for that. But I'm going to talk to you guys about the Office of Workforce and Community Initiatives and Department of Social Services. So the Office of Workforce and Community Initiatives is a small department inside the Missouri Department of Social Services. And we actually are the ones who facilitate all of the contracts and funding for the employment and training programs, as well as community initiative programs, which I'll get into here in just a little bit. I am actually over the business and community engagement team. I have a staff right now of 7 people based strategically around the state. We are actually in the process of hiring 2 more, so we will have 9. Out of the 9, 7 will be working regionally, and then 2 work statewide. 1 is based strictly for veterans initiatives, and 1 is based strictly for justice involved individuals. So I'm going to go ahead and start our slideshow here and give you just some information about the things that OWCI and DSS has to offer so that you're aware of those. Like I said, our role is we administer nearly $475 million in the community employment training programs and benefit programs that are available to low-income clientele in the state of Missouri. And one thing that we pride ourselves on is we try to develop systematic approaches with all of our stakeholders, partner agencies, and internal divisions.
And Laura, I
Some-
don't think that it's advancing yet, or at least the one that I'm seeing isn't.
Oh, well,
If
let's
you wanna go
try.
to
See if we can
slideshow
scoot
and
this over. Let me share the different screen. I bet that's the problem.
right.
Thank you for stopping me.
I'm just glad that you didn't melt.
Me too.
That you're able to be with us today.
It was toasty. Let's restart this. When you have 3 monitors all going at one time, it chooses which one it wants to use.
Yeah, I
And it's
literally
not-
gave that up from doing so many Zoom presentations, and now I only have my one screen just for that reason. So no worries.
Yeah, I'll just manually move it. You guys won't shoot me for that. Okay, so here is the first slide that I just talked about, our role in facilitating the contracts and grants. Here is some of the programs that we, as the Department of Social Services, facilitate. The first one that we'll talk about is MoHealthNet, which is otherwise known as Medicaid. There are multiple types of Medicaid, or sorry, I'm an old school worker here, so I still call it Medicaid. There's multiple different programs within MoHealthNet that people could be eligible for. Typically, we have the people who are disabled, which would be permanently and totally disabled and unable to work for 12 months or longer. People who are blind and visually impaired, that one does have a requirement that they must be over the age of 18. Anyone who's over 65 years or older. We have the MoHealthNet program for pregnant women and their newborns. Then we have our uninsured women's program. We have the MoHealthNet for kids. We have MoHealthNet for families. And the newest program that they've introduced was the Medicaid expansion. Obviously, the biggest one that people think about is food stamps, which now is referred to as SNAP, or Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Basically, when you're talking with your people, just keep in mind that things always change, policies always change, people's income always change. If they've ever been denied previously, don't let that stop them if they've had a change in circumstances. There's not a limit to any amount of time that people can apply. You can apply every day for 12 months if you want to. You can send in a new application. Now, the workers are probably not going to be real happy with you, but you can apply as many times as necessary. I've listed out some of the criteria for receiving food stamps. The gross income has to be less than 130% of the federal poverty guidelines. You obviously have to live in Missouri. You have to have a social security number for any household member that's going to receive the benefits. There is a resource limit of 2,750. That does not include the home you live in or vehicles. And it does not also include your current month income. And then there are certain drug felonies that could exclude you from the program. But again, don't let that stop anyone from applying, because there are lots of stipulations and exemptions to things as far as the drug felonies. There's a lot of ways that people can apply now, or that they can be eligible now. One of the programs that does not get utilized as much as I would like for it to get utilized is the child care program. It is basically helping pay for child care for children under the age of 13 or over the age of 13 if they are a disabled individual. So again, I've listed out some of the criteria. It has to be below 150% of the poverty level. The caretakers have to have at least one of them that has a need, which would be employed, participating in job training or job search, attending school, being disabled themselves, being homeless, receiving services from Children's Division. And then the way that those amounts, that how much the state pays versus how much the family pays, is all done basically on a sliding scale. And as the higher your income goes, the more that the family is required to pay.
And Laura, is it okay to, just because I have a question in the
Sure.
chat, if I may interrupt, for
Absolutely.
individuals over 18, are they considered their own household if they're still living
Yes.
in a family home?
It depends on which program. So for Mo Health Net, if they are applying as a disabled person, once they hit 18, they are their own individual. You do not have to include your parents or siblings on your application. For food stamps, that age actually increases to 22. So if you're under the age of 22 and still living at home, you would have to include your family, your parents and your siblings.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Another program that DSS offers is temporary assistance. Temporary assistance is basically in the old days when people said they were getting a welfare check. That is basically what temporary assistance is. It is a cash grant for families with 0 to extremely low income. Some of the criteria to be eligible is there has to be a child under the age of 18 in the household, or if the child is 19, they must still be enrolled in high school. Sometimes people don't understand, but once that child hits age 19 and they graduate, they're no longer eligible. So even though it says 19 and in high school, the moment they graduate, they fall off the case. The resource limit for this one is much, much lower than all of the others. It's $1,000. Again, everyone on the case would have to have a social security number or apply for one, be a Missouri resident, be a citizen of the United States or a qualified alien. If there is a single parent household and they're applying because they're not receiving child support to be able to support the child, then that parent, the custodial parent, must cooperate with child support enforcement, which basically means they need to assist child support in naming the absent parent, giving any information they know about the absent parent so that child support can try to contact them to set up a support order. And there is a 45-month lifetime limit on temporary assistance. And unfortunately, that limit actually follows you from state to state. So if someone were in Kansas or Illinois or even further out, not a neighboring state, and they receive temporary assistance, when they come to Missouri, we would actually have to contact that other state to find out how many months they've used, because you cannot go over 45 months in your lifetime.
And do those months when they're child, I'm sorry, do those months count if they're like from
No.
0 to 18? Okay, it's after.
No.
Okay, sorry,
Yes.
after graduation.
Yes, as an adult receiving the benefits. So here we're going to start jumping into the programs that my unit actually facilitates. We are the ones who run the Emergency Food Assistance Program, or TFAP. TFAP is the program that funds all of the local food banks. And then in turn, the food banks, there's 6 around the state of Missouri, they are the ones who distribute the food to the local food pantries. So there is, again, income guidelines for that, and that is 185% of the income limit. And I know it's teeny tiny, but here is a map of the 6 regions that the food banks cover. I'm sorry, the food banks cover. Another one that we fund that is a very large program is the Home Utilities Program, or LIHEAP. LIHEAP stands for Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program. And that is depending upon your income and your main heating source, you could be eligible for a one-time grant starting in, depending on if you're disabled, they start those either in October or November each year, taking applications, or if you're not elderly or disabled, they start those in December. But those are basically on a sliding scale fee. You can receive a one-time grant that automatically gets sent to your heating supplier for you. After that, if you are in a crisis, there is an additional program that is called ESIP, or Emergency Crisis Intervention Program, that does require a shutoff notice, but you would be eligible for the program to pay the minimum amount due to keep your utilities on. So those actually are contracted through the community action agencies around the state. So they're the ones who run that program for us. They send out applications yearly based on their mailing listing of people who had received the prior year. Those typically go out during the months of October, November, and December. Again, there's a little bit of eligibility on there. So you have to have less than $3,000 in a bank account, retirement account, or investments, meet income guidelines, be a Missouri resident and a U.S. citizen, and be responsible for paying the utilities Even if you rent, you can still be eligible. If your landlord has the utility in their name, you would just have your landlord fill out an additional form stating that, and then you could still be eligible for that payment. We run the Alternatives to Abortion program. This program is basically out there to help pregnant and parenting women choose an alternative to abortion, whether that be they choose to keep the pregnancy and keep the child themselves, or whether they choose to keep the pregnancy and utilize adoption. Any of those alternatives that are out there, these basically have funds that can help the parent, or the woman with whatever services they might need. It could be used for a month's rent if she's behind in rent and facing eviction. It could be used to purchase groceries if she's ran out of her food stamps. It could be used for just a plethora of different things, but it's basically just to help the pregnant woman or the parenting woman be able to provide for her child. The Community Services Block Grant, or CSBG, is the main funding source for the community action agencies throughout the state, and we're the ones who facilitate that contract as well. Some of the things that the community action agencies do is they all complete a community needs assessment to find out what the different needs are in the regions that they serve, so that they can tailor those programs to meet the needs of their residents. Whether that be additional utility programs, food programs, transportation programs, employment and training programs, all of those things are all basically eligible to be reimbursed through the CSBG program. So it's just a big giant block for the community action agencies to utilize as they see fit with their different programs. And I've included a map here of those different community action agencies and their locations that they serve. Try to give just a second there so everybody can see that. In addition to our community action agencies, we fund our community partnerships. So in the state of Missouri, there are 20 community partnerships, and they have 6 core programs that they focus on, which are safe children and families, healthy children and families, children ready to enter school, children and youth succeeding in school, youth ready to enter the workforce and become productive citizens, and then have parents working. So again, it's funding that they can choose to use how they want based on their community needs assessment on what they feel their region actually needs, because as we know, each part of the state is totally different. And what works in one place might not work in the other. So here is a map of the current community partnerships. And then we're going to get into our big programs, our employment and training programs. So our employment and training programs are for anyone receiving public assistance benefits, whether that be SNAP benefits or temporary assistance. Both of those do have an employment and training component assigned to them. We have free short-term training that's available, job coaching, resume preparations, connections to employment, and then supportive services that could help with anything from transportation reimbursement to supplies needed to daycare registration, basically anything that could be a barrier to our participants being able to go to training or gain a self-sustaining job. We're going to look at and see if we can take care of that for them. So Skill Up is the employment and training program that is associated with SNAP. That is for anyone receiving SNAP benefits. There's no cost. It's completely voluntary as long as they're not an ABOD. Now, ABOD stands for able-bodied adult without a dependent. And that is for anyone over the age of 18 that does not have a child on their food stamp case, who is not disabled, who is not homeless. Basically, anyone that is out there that does not have any barriers to employment is considered an ABOD. And they have reinstated those work requirements as of July, which means they are only eligible for 3 months of food stamps in a 36-month period. Now that 36 months does roll. So we're going to be looking at July of 23 through June of 26. So if they receive food stamps for 3 months and they're not fulfilling their requirements as an ABOD, they're not eligible to receive any more food stamp benefits until they do meet those requirements. Those requirements are working at least 30 hours per week in a 30-day period. There are 188 locations statewide that we contract with to run our Skill Up program. And we do have an employment and training page, which the link is right here, that does give a lot of information, and it does actually have an interactive map. So you can just put your zip code in and answer just 2 quick questions, and it will show you all of the contracted agencies within your area and how far they are with their contact information. Another one of the programs we facilitate is the JAG program, which is Jobs for America's Graduates. It is facilitated in Missouri high school and some middle schools. It basically, the counselors in those schools identified kids who they feel are at risk for not graduating. So they basically give them case management to help them to make sure they're not falling through the cracks, to give them a little bit of additional support to make sure that they are able to graduate and have any barriers that they might have removed, whether that be within workforce or education. We also facilitate the Jobs League program. This used to be called the Summer Jobs League program, but we've removed summer and now that is year round. It is completed and facilitated through our Missouri Job Centers. And that is basically helping children ages 14 to 24 gain employment. One of our big programs that people are not aware of that is a phenomenal program is our Excel Centers. These are actually adult high schools. When you complete your courses, you do not receive a HiSET or GED, you actually receive a high school diploma. They have free on-site daycare. They help with everything they can. They have a coach that works with you from day 1 through graduation. They are currently located in 6 locations. We have Poplar Bluff, St. Louis, Springfield, Columbia, Cape Girardeau, and Florissant. And there are plans for expansion, I believe, in the Kansas City area soon. So just like our Skill Up program, there is a work program for people receiving temporary assistance, and that is actually called Missouri Work Assistance Program. Again, the TA is the program that provides cash assistance payments to families that have 0 or extremely low income. This one is not voluntary. This one is mandatory as long as you do not meet an exemption, which would be a child under the age of 12 weeks or being disabled. So these are basically, you are assigned a case manager who will work with you to create an employment and training program, an individualized employment plan. And whether that be you want to go back to school to get a certification, or you're ready just to go to work, whatever the case may be, they're going to be there to work with you. And again, all of those services that are provided are free. There is no charge to the participants. Being DSS, we couldn't get away with not telling people about our children's programs. So we obviously have the child abuse and neglect program. We all are mandated reporters here, so that information is on here as well. We did put a little information in here about what is abuse versus what is neglect. Anytime you feel that you might see abuse or neglect, we ask that you call and report that anonymously to our hotline so that an investigator can go out and check on the child and make sure there's no issues. In addition to that, we also have our Victims of Crime program and our Domestic Violence Services and Shelters program. So those are fundings for all of the domestic violence shelters and the Victims of Crime programs that we offer. So we have a lot of different programs, right? So we always like to tell you guys a little bit of our outcomes. So this was for state fiscal year 22. It just goes through, we had 3,100 Skill Up enrollments, almost 2,000 MWA enrollments. Now keep in mind that this was still when the pandemic public health emergency was in effect. So a lot of these people did not have to enroll in these programs. These were all voluntary. So that being said, these are pretty good outcomes. But we go through the different programs here and the number of households that we were able to assist for energy. There was a water program at one time that has been discontinued with our Victims of Crime Act, and then our Alternatives to Abortion program as well. One of the big things we do at OWCI is we do outreach. We believe that we're not just going to tell people about our programs, we're going to tell people about all of the programs that we know about, whether that be through job centers, through DESE, through Senate Bill 40 boards, whatever that the case may be, VR, RSV, anything that we know that might help someone, we're going to tell them about. So we've developed a couple of pretty unique things. We have targeted text messaging. So if anyone signs up to be on a public assistance benefit, whether that be SNAP, Medicaid, temporary assistance, and they've agreed to receive our text messages, they've signed up for that, we can send them a targeted text message, whether that be there's a job fair in your area on Tuesday, click here for more information, or don't forget Medicaid annual renewals are starting next month, or anything of that nature that we think that people need to know about. We also have our Gov Delivery email subscription service. We are over 163,000 subscribers statewide. We typically send out 2 to 3 emails weekly. Those emails consist of the same types of information. Here's a listing of all of the job fair events throughout the state this week. Here are some resources that you might be interested in. We just had several back to school events that we were publicizing because obviously the kids are going back to school and needed assistance with school supplies and things. Anything that we think that Missourians themselves need to know about, that we need to get the information about, is there. And we don't strictly just stop at our benefits or our programs. We offer that to anyone. So if you have anything coming up that you think that we need to get out to people, you can always get a hold of us. We do ask that we have a couple weeks notice to get that information scheduled and out, but we can gladly do that for anybody. So obviously next is reasons to send outreach. So hiring events, community events, resource fairs, new programs, anything like that. We can definitely get that information out for you. One of the things that we did have last year, and it actually just ended about a month ago, was our DSS Learning Labs. It was a 30-minute presentation by, first off, it was state benefits and state programs, and we went through all of our agencies, and then we opened it up to our partner organizations. So anyone who had a program that they wanted to get out, they just came on for 30 minutes, gave a brief presentation like we are today to give you the information. We actually have all of those recorded, and we have those up on our website, and they are there for anyone to go in at any time and get that information. So I would definitely, when you get my PowerPoint, utilize this link because there's lots of good information in there, especially if you're brand new to your position and not really for sure of the different resources around you. And then last, this is our information. Justin Logan is our operations manager. He is my manager, and that is his email address. He's based in Jeff City. And then here's my information. If you ever need to contact me, feel free to. And then I also, just to plug my team a little bit, I did list a map here with their contact information. So these are the regions we're currently, they currently have. And then down here, the 2 that are statewide are Josiah and Jake. They are the veterans and justice involved. So if you need to reach out to anyone, please let us know if there's anything we can do to help, to advertise, to point you in any direction. I had an email today from someone that said, hey, I have someone that is asking questions about Ticket to Work. Do you know where that's at or where I can point them? Well, it took me 2 seconds to answer that question because I did know where some good information might be. So feel free to utilize us as a resource as necessary. We don't mind it at all.
Wow, Laura, I don't know how you keep all of that straight. I am so impressed that one office can do so much stuff. Gosh, that is a lot.
We do
to
a lot,
manage.
and
That's
we
great.
actually only have about 75 employees.
Well, it
So.
sounds like you need 75 more to keep track of all that. You did have one question in the chat here. That is, if an adult with disabilities is on SSI, can they apply for SNAP even if the rest of the family members would not qualify?
So let me get a little more information. Do they have children? Are they just a single individual and not the parent or caretaker of anyone in the household?
Let's just assume they're not. Unless
Okay.
I get a response here.
If they are not, then yes. So if you have Aunt Joe who lives with her sister and her sister's husband and children, yes, she could apply on her own and not have to include the rest of them. The kicker to that is on the application, there's a question that says, who do you purchase and prepare your meals with? So whoever they say they purchase and prepare their meals with is included on the application, whether they be related or not. Now, there's some people who are mandatory. So obviously husband and wife are mandatory. They're going to be included together. Their children under the age of 19 are mandatory and they're going to be included together. You cannot pick and choose out of those mandatory household members who you include and who you don't include. But when you're talking about people who are not married and who do not have children in the home, it's all going to be based on how they answer that question, if that makes sense.
Wow, you just know all the details of all these programs too. Great, Laura.
Well, you know, it's 15 years of working here, so.
That's great. Well, gosh, we really appreciate all of your time and all that great information. I know everyone is relieved that they'll be getting your slides because you have so many great resources on there that I know we all want to follow up with. So thank you for all your time today. And I think we are going to be ready for our next speaker. We're just going to go right into the Job Accommodation Network. So I'm super excited to have Lindsay join us again. Those who were here yesterday will remember Lindsay. Remember, Kim is her boss, so we want to be, Kim helped organize this with me, so we want to be sure to give Lindsay all the support she needs here to do another great job today. And Patty, I do see you have this other question. What about parents? I'll see if I can get a follow-up answer to that. Or Laura, I don't know if you want to maybe put a response in the chat as well. So, but Lindsay, if you're ready to go, we're ready for you to hear about the Job Accommodation Network. Jan, I'm so excited. I love their website. There's so much on there. So.
Yeah, thanks for having me again, Stacy. And I appreciate the plug again. So my screen will not let me share my sound. Hopefully that's not a problem, but we'll work it out. So I am Lindsay Hartzler. I am the Assistant Director of Pre-Employment Transition Services. Kim asked me to present on this, not because I'm an expert, but because I use it a lot with my students. So I feel like I need to preface that by saying I'm not an expert on Jan, but I do use it a lot. So here we go. We're going to start off talking about like, what is Jan and how would you use it for accommodation searches, A to Z lists, and then how employers might use it. So first, askjan.org is the website that I'm going to be talking about. That is the Job Accommodation Network. You can go to their website and find a plethora of information, and you can dig for days depending on what you're looking for. It is a service funded by the U.S. Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy. They assist individuals with job accommodation issues. They create and implement job accommodation plans. And they not only partner with individuals with disabilities, but they also partner with employers. So if employers have a question on whether or not an accommodation is appropriate or reasonable, they can contact Jan to get more information on that, or maybe how to implement an accommodation that they don't know very much about. They have about 40,000 customers annually. So this is their bread and butter. This is what they do. People call them, people chat with them, people text with them and ask them about what accommodations are or what are common accommodations for a certain job or disability. So I'm really hoping that my sound works. And you might have to tell me, Stacy, if it doesn't, and we can just skip the video.
Okay. Darn, no, I'm not hearing it, but I am seeing.
That's what I was afraid of. That's okay. So if you go to their website, I stole the video from their website. So it gives a really good overview. It talks about that they not only do accommodations, but they give you ideas for technology that you might need at work. And that's the big question that they get a lot is, what is some adaptive technology that might be helpful for me at work? The video is really good. So if you go to the website, it might be worth a view. Okay, so I also stole this from the Jan website. It talks about disability disclosure and how that works. This is what I spend a lot of time talking to my students about at pre-ETS in self-advocacy, is talking about the 3 big things they need to know when they want to disclose their disability to an employer. They need to know not necessarily the name of their disability, although that's very helpful, but definitely the nature of it. They need to know what is hard for them to do specifically at the job. And it's really helpful for them to know their accommodations ahead of time before they go in and disclose their disability, because it might put that employer at ease. If they already know specifically what accommodations they need, then that employer is more likely to be like, oh yeah, that's reasonable, I can totally do that. So you can also ask for accommodations in the hiring process. Again, you would have to disclose your disability before the interview process or before the application. Jan gives this list of accommodations that you can ask for. Again, this is going to be up to the employer on whether or not it's reasonable and appropriate. For instance, if you asked for questions ahead of time before the interview, they might give you a partial list. But if the idea of the question is to get how would you think on your feet, or how would you act in a certain situation, then they might not provide that one ahead of time. You can also ask for somebody to go with you as a support person in your interview, not necessarily as somebody that might answer questions for you, but as somebody just being there and having that person in the room might ease your anxiety a little bit. Jan gives this list as accommodations for succeeding and advancing in your job. Again, all of this would be up to the employer on whether or not they would be able to determine if it was reasonable. But all of these are definitely things that you could ask for if you thought that it might help you at your job. And then employers could consult with Jan to determine if that's reasonable. I found this quote and I really like it. We need to make every single thing accessible to every single person with a disability. And that is kind of what Jan is all about, is making sure that every part of your job, not just the job itself, but every part of your job is accessible to you, and providing accommodations and ideas for accommodations that might be helpful for that. Okay, so when you go to the askjan.org, this is what their website looks like. I took some screenshots. This portion right here is the accommodation search. And you can type in your accommodation or your disability. One thing about the accommodation search is it gives you a ton of information. It gives you lots of articles and blog posts and lots of things that you can dig through, which is super helpful if you have the time. And then we'll talk later about how maybe you can organize those so that you can visit them later if you don't have time. But my favorite function of Jan is the A to Z list up here at the top on the top banner, because not only are you going to search by accommodation, you're going to search by limitation or work-related function. I tell my students that not all people with a certain disability need the same accommodations. So that's why we maybe search by limitation or work-related function instead of disability. If you wanted to search by disability, it might give you things that you haven't thought of before as far as accommodations and technologies that are available. But searching by limitation and work-related function it narrows it down and brings it down to that really specific barrier that the student might have to work. So the A to Z list is my favorite thing to use. So when you search, so this search was executive functioning deficits, and it gives you a very long list of accommodations that might be helpful for that specific limitation. It also gives situations and solutions for students, and I use this a lot in my instruction because sometimes accommodations is not a concrete thought for my students. So we talk about, what does this look like in real life? And they can see the real world situation of a grocery stocker that needed this accommodation, and it is available. Another cool thing about Jan is if you wanted to click on one of these accommodations, so if you clicked on speech recognition software or speech to text, it's going to give you a long list of companies, applications, devices that might help with that specific accommodation. Jan does not endorse or get paid by any of these companies. It's just a list to kind of make you aware of it so that you could kind of do your research to figure out if any of these technologies or apps or applications would be good for you. And I found a bunch of things for my students that I didn't even know existed, and it's really going to help them as far as getting accommodations at work that we might not have seen otherwise, other than using the Jan platform. The last thing is new recently is they started a MyJan portal, where I told you earlier that when you do a search, it gives you a really long list of blog posts and articles and all the things, and it could take a while to dig through. So you could create a MyJan portal account. It doesn't collect your confidential information, but it's really a place where you can organize all of those blog posts and articles. Maybe you don't have time to dig in right now, but you might have time in the future. You can save them onto your portal. And then if something happens or there's maybe a new accommodation added, it will alert you to say this new accommodation has been added in this, or this new technology has been added in this, which is pretty cool too. It also gives you a chance to go back and review. Nothing upsets me more when I'm like, I know I saw this somewhere, I need to go back and look at it. The MyJan portal can kind of let you sift through it, because there is so much information. It helps you kind of pick and choose the pieces that are most relevant. Okay, so this is how you would contact the Job Accommodation Network. The website, like I said, is where all the information is. That's at askjan.org. They also have a call hotline that you can call and ask for help or assistance if you needed help getting an accommodation plan. They also have one of those live chat bots at the bottom, so you can chat with somebody on the Jan team to ask about accommodation plans and things like that. They also have social media accounts that you can follow. I have to get on that. Okay, so that's all I have. I hope I went through that really fast. Sorry, Stacey.
No, that was great. I mean, Jan has a lot of resources, and I don't know if anyone wants to bring their dog to work as a support. This is my support dog, Maxie. But Jan even has resources on, hey, here's why I need to have a support dog. Or, what I think is great about Jan is that you can have a discussion with your employer, even of like, hey, I have migraines. Can we do something with these lights? Or, maybe it's someone's perfume that's killing you, or maybe they just need to stagger the hours or allow for more breaks. A lot of times there are very reasonable, inexpensive accommodations that will allow people with intellectual and developmental disabilities to be working. And we just got to think outside the box here. And that's why I really suggest that all of you, even over our little break that we'll take here soon, I suggest you all check out that Jan website and you get some ideas on, thinking outside the box. They even have like drafts of the letters for you to give your employer. So, and
they have role plays for the conversations. So if you wanted to, they show you how that conversation should look. It's a really cool in-depth tool.
And it's all free.
Yeah.
I think everything that we've talked about in our employment summit so far, Kim can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think everything we've talked about is free. I mean, our taxes are paying for it, but free of charge to you all. So that's super great. Are there any questions about the Job Accommodation Network? I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. I get something that my dog is cute. Yes, he is. And all free resources, thanks to the Jan team. So Lindsay, I think that we're all going to agree, Lindsay, Kim, she has to get another raise. Good job.
All right.
So.
2 in 2 days. Great. Thank you.
I'll take that into consideration.
Okay, good. Great. Well, thank you so much. You're welcome to stay with us, and we really appreciate your time. So, if it is okay with you all, we didn't take a break earlier. We do have kind of a unique small group here. So 1:40 is when Lisa's going to go on. Lisa, would it be okay if we just took a 7-minute break and came back at 1:40, just so if everyone needs to do anything, they can take care of that, and we'll just get you started right at 1:40. Is that okay with you? All right, I'm seeing that's okay. Great. I can't hear you, but we'll be back at 1:40, and I'll have your slides up and ready to go.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. All right, everyone, we are back and ready for Lisa Meisenheimer. Lisa is joining us from the Missouri Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And Lisa is she's also, which is also part of, VR is part of that. So give me just one sec here, Lisa, and we will get your presentation ready to go.
Are you able to hear me okay now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I
Do you
figured
see the
out that I
screen?
actually had to unmute myself on my computer as well. I'm using my microphone off of my phone, so I'm glad I was able to figure that out.
Well, we can hear you great now, so you're good to go.
Awesome. I might have been able to fumble through it a little bit more and use my time because I feel like I'm going to go through this so quickly. But so first, thank you for having me. As Stacy said, my name is Lisa Meisenheimer, and I'm the Director of Independent Living Services. And so the Independent Living Services is under vocational rehabilitation. And our primary role as the designated state entity for Missouri Centers for Independent Living is to administer the IL funds and conduct federal and state level compliance reviews. So the centers are actually required to undergo these reviews every 2 years. And that might be too big, Stacy, but in Missouri, we do have 22 centers across the state. And a few of those do have satellite offices. I'm so sorry. I feel like I should have minimized it for you. And so because of the locations of the centers being spread out through all 22 centers being spread across the state, that makes Missouri an underserved state and not a unserved state. Do you want me to try to share my screen, Stacy?
Is it showing it now? No.
No.
Hang on a sec. I'm sorry. I tried to minimize it and I made it all go away.
I was able to follow your instructions yesterday and got on as panelist, so if it helps for me to show my screen, I can do it.
Yeah, if you want to do that, why don't you go ahead?
Okay.
Well, I apologize for that, participants. My fault.
I thought I was going to apologize for the length of my presentation, so I feel a little better. Is it there now?
Got it. Perfect.
Okay. So there's the map with the 22 centers. I recently got to go to Bales, which is in Kennett, Missouri. And that was definitely an overnight stay. But as you can see, Missouri's 22 centers. And then I've also included a list of the cities where all of those centers are located, and those are the main offices. Pardon me. So centers for independent living are very unique and were a result of the independent living movement. The IL movement was based on the belief that people living with disabilities have the right to live a free and independent lives without being denied the basic rights granted to people without disabilities. Centers are designed and operated by individuals with disabilities. Those are some of the compliance standards that we look at, but they offer an array of services to help individuals live independently in their communities. Programs and services to help those individuals meet their goals is based on the community's input through the completion of what's called a service area needs assessment. And this is done annually. All 22 centers are required to collect information from their consumers, but then they also ask anybody in the community to go to the Survey Monkey that's available on the DESI website to complete. And that allows the centers to develop their own work plan and goals, but then it also is used to develop our state plan for independent living, which is the responsibility of the Missouri State Independent Living Council. These programs provide tools, resources, and support for integrating people with disabilities fully into their communities, promoting equal opportunity, self-determination, and respect. So as you can see, I mentioned that centers are designed and operated by individuals with disabilities. And so one of the first standards we review for is that staff and board member rosters must have a composite of 51% self-identifying as a person with a disability. So within the staff, we split that. And so at least 51% of staff members have to have a disability, and over 50% of the decision makers of staff have to have a disability. Centers directly provide and coordinate through referral services, which assist consumers to help increasing their abilities to exercise control over their lives. Centers are unique, and they are 501(c)(3) not-for-profit agencies, and so most of their services are actually free. The centers offer a broad range of community-based consumer-directed services to all ages and disabilities. So when we look at our reports, we actually have different age groups. And so we have an age group of 0 to 5, and then we go all the way down. So there are no age limits. Eligibility for centers is based off of a person reporting a disability. And for me, it's really important for people to know that centers are not residential facilities. They're not places for individuals to go to during their rehab or even long-term nursing facilities. They provide tools, resources, and referrals to allow people to live individually outside of in the communities. So there's 22 centers, and again, you keep hearing me say they're unique, and they really are. I'm not going to go over all of the services they provide, but I'm going to definitely provide you with contact information to myself, my team members who work with those centers, but then also we'll be able to give you the information to contact them at the end of the presentation. But centers offer many different services. I call it the A through W list. So depending on what their community is reported as needing, the centers are required to offer 5 core services, which I've listed with asterisks next to them. So we have, should probably follow this list, but I'm going to go with what I wrote, which we have the independent skills and life skills training. So that can be anything from personal financial management class to some centers offering actual driver's prep training. Then we have the 5th core of peer counseling. So the peer counseling is peer-led groups which can meet every month, but they can be groups to help manage arthritis pain, or social groups where the center may have a social activity with an adaptive gaming night. So for those individuals that may have some anxiety, or that's their goal is to increase their social interaction with peers, they can reach out to the center. And like I said, these are peer-led groups. And so again, it goes back to, this is why the centers have staff that identify as having a disability. Individual and systems advocacy. So this could be something like working with the local polling centers in your community to make sure that they're accessible. most all of the centers go to Jefferson City every year during legislative days and talk to their representatives, letting them know what they're needing, and just telling their stories. I knew of an individual that actually worked with their local center to help get curb cuts put into place in his small town. What they ended up doing was provided the consumer some information on the ADA, so that way when he did go to the city, he was able to directly show what those accessibility laws were and what the rules were. So he was very successful, and that small town now has curb cuts for individuals that have mobility issues and barriers. There's also the information and referral services, which I always say is one of the most important services that the centers can offer, because it may be a service coordinator that contacts the center to try to get information, or it could be a consumer with a disability, but anybody can call the centers to see if they are able to provide a service. And if not, the center's going to be able to give you information to a different provider. If they don't have it, they'll look it up and follow up with you to try to provide that information as well, and they track this. And lastly, and we can, is the transition services, and I'll go through that a little bit more in depth with some other programming, but transition services, the centers actually have two types of transition services. And so they have transition services for youth to post-secondary life, or transition services that facilitate the transition of individuals from nursing homes or other institutions back into the community. And there are funding resources for that too, that help the individual with maybe first month's rent or some household items, so that way they're able to cook for themselves, and even self-care items. That is actually one big resource that the centers provide, is self-care items, personal hygiene, cleaning, for those individuals that may need adult diapers because incontinence. So one of the other big services they provide is durable medical equipment. As we know, that those items aren't covered a lot of times, and so the centers have rooms, I mean big rooms full of different types of DME, anything from wheelchairs to canes to grab bars to shower benches, simple items too. I've seen centers that I call it simple but life-changing and life-saving, but the daily pill boxes, so that way individuals, I actually referred a lot of my clients when I worked for VR as a counselor to help them with their medication management. I would send them, I refer them to the centers, but the centers, some centers also do ramp modifications, home modifications to the access entryways. They also do some benefits counseling. There are 3 centers that are actual employment networks and can help with benefits counseling, but most of the centers can do benefits counseling. I go over so much more, but I know our time is tight. Rehab Tech, a lot of the centers have contracts with Missouri Assistive Technology, and so they have different resources and items for to look at, so different types of telephones, communication devices, that type of thing. So, and the best thing to do is, if you aren't certain if they have it, is to ask the centers. But one of the programs is the pre-employment transition summer programs that the centers have offered. This program, if the centers choose to apply and provide the program, is offered, pardon me, This program is offered to students with disabilities ages 16 to 21, or for those ages 14 and 15, if their IEP or 504 plan has written into it that the student would benefit from the pre-ET services. 3 areas are covered in the summer programs that the centers can offer, which is your job exploration counseling, work readiness, and instruction in self-advocacy. So some of the programming, such as the JAN, I know there was a center that offered as part of their job exploration, and self-advocacy was actually looking over the JAN network information. And then another center was able to go down to a local business, and there were different types of departments that the students got to go visit, and so they actually got to do mock interviews with the HR staff at this business, and then they also got to just do some work readiness training with some of the jobs that they had there, which was with the items that they were selling in their store, clothing items. So just depending on what the center, what center it is and where they're located, their programming is different. But what I would say is, in the end, if especially a pre-employment transition service program you feel would benefit your kid, your student, and you're not sure if it's offered at the school or a center, go to the center and ask, and they may be able to work with you. And if they aren't able to partner and get more referrals from the school, they'll definitely be able to work with your student one-on-one and develop a plan, an independent living plan. And so this is the contact information for my team, the name of my team members and the centers they work with. My apologies, but if you want to contact me, I can definitely get you in contact with the center directly, or I'll make sure that my team member responds to you and they'll get you connected as well. I did put down there the links to the independent living page, as well as the Most Silk page, because they do have all of the centers listed out on there, and you can check out each one of those centers directly that way. So like I didn't fill up my time, but I hope the information was helpful.
This was wonderful. And I'm so glad that, Lisa, that you clarified the centers for independent living are not facilities, because I used to always think that they were as well. And I think that's a misconception. People think they can go to a CIL. No, and we call them CILs for short, the Centers for Independent Living. But how many awesome resources you have there. That's wonderful. And I, have some walkers and rollators and canes that I think there's a CIL in St. Louis that I'm planning on donating those to. So please, use, this is something that these are, again, free services that you all really need to utilize and share with others so they know that all of this is available. So Lisa, we just really appreciate all your time today. Remember, you all are going to get these slides, so you'll have all of these great resources that Lisa shared, and we're just so happy you could be with us today.
Oh, I thank you so much. And hi, Kim, I miss you.
Hi, Lisa, I miss you too. And I appreciate you sharing all this information about Centers for Independent Living, because I think they are a well-kept secret. People don't really know. And one of the things I want to highlight that you said is that every single Center for Independent Living, they have those 5 core services that you talked about, but they also provide additional services based upon the needs of their catchment area. And I think that's really important for people to know, is that there are those additional services, but you almost have to reach out to that center that serves your region so you know what additional services might be available to you. And not only that, but they serve all age ranges. I mean, there's really, am I correct in saying that there's no age limit to who could access services?
Absolutely. And honestly, if you self-identify with it as having a disability, you don't have to provide that documentation. If you tell them I have arthritis and the pain is keeping me from being able to bend over and wash my feet. You know, I laugh, but 4 feet, you know, that's our foundation. So anyways, but yes, you really do have to reach out. That's why I wasn't going to do any justice to the 22 centers and to try to provide all the services they provide. That is actually one of the most important things, is that they reach out to their consumers in their community to find out what do you all need, and completing these surveys are so important. And so I invite you all to go to our DESI website, to the IL page, and there's a Survey Monkey, and it'll ask you where you live, you know, ask about housing issues, transportation issues, employment issues. And right now, the state, the Independent Living Council, the MODDC, is working on the next bill. And so your input is so important right now. I'm going to get off my soapbox.
Oh, Lisa, that would be great if you could throw that in the chat. And again, everyone will have access to but if you want to put that in the chat, just so our presenters have it. And one other thing, and maybe this is, you could put this link in the chat too. Luke had said, is there a list of all the sills by region?
I will try to find that, but that's why I know it wasn't perfect. The map, and then the city, I had the list of the cities and the centers that where they're located. So if I can find, though, a list, a more detailed list, if anything, I'll send you the MODDC website link, that way you can go to each center's page.
Perfect. All right. Well, we're so
Thank
happy
you.
you were with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, partners. Next, I'm super excited to, I know I'm super excited about everybody who comes on, but I'm really excited for our last and final speaker. And this is Chad Hinkle. He is part of Department of Mental Health under the Division of Behavioral Health. And Chad Hinkle is here to talk to us about some benefit planning and a variety of other things. So I don't want to put you in a little box, Chad, because you've got a whole bunch of stuff to talk about. So if you are ready to go, and if you're good to share your screen, then we'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Stacy. Yes, I'm Chad Hinkle. I'm the Director of Employment Services for the Departmental Health Division of Behavioral Health. I'm here to present on DBH's employment programs, but there's going to be a little bit of everything, and I'll try to keep it at 20 minutes. Stacy, Kim, is this interactive? Can I ask questions of the audience or in the chat or anything like that?
Yes, you can ask, and they can put their questions in the chat.
Excellent.
And answer.
Well, I know I'm like the last presenter, so I will try to be as brief as possible, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all today. Bear with me just a moment while I share my screen.
Well, and we appreciate Chad coming on just a few minutes early so that we could just keep it seamless and keep it going. So thank you, Chad, for that.
You're quite welcome. Hope you've had a good conference.
We have. It's just amazing. There are so many resources and so much great information out there. So yes, it's been really good.
Okay, can you all see that?
Yes, sir.
All right, very good. Okay, so everyone, just to start with, just a quick brief overview of the Division of Behavioral Health. So Division of Behavioral Health, or DBH, is responsible for assuring that Missouri has availability of prevention, treatment, and recovery support services for folks with substance use disorders, and for assuring availability, prevention, evaluation, treatment, and rehab services for individuals and their families requiring mental health services. And we do this through contracted providers throughout the state called community mental health centers, certified community behavioral health organizations, and substance use treatment programs. So when I'm throwing those words around, I want you to keep in mind that these contracted providers are in essence the gateway into DBH services. I'm going to have lots of links referencing each slide at the bottom of the slides. Here is just our main website for DBH. So when someone goes to one of these contracted providers, they're going to get a screening or an assessment that's going to determine if they qualify for services. And the link at the bottom of this slide is important because it will direct someone to the closest provider where they can go visit and determine if they qualify for Division of Behavioral Health services. Now, I want to kind of get into the employment aspect of this presentation. And I consider myself, like a lot of you all probably do, an employment advocate. So I want you all to think about why we work. Why do you do what you do? Why do we get up in the morning every day? Or why do we, if we have an evening shift, why do we work late into the night? If you are not in the workforce, but you're considering it, why? Why do you do that? If you could put something in the chat or if you want to speak up, that's fine. But why do we do what we do when it comes to employment? Why are you choosing the field that you're choosing? Can you think of any of the benefits on why we do it? I'm the last presenter, I know. So I'll tell you what, we're going to go to the next slide.
So Nicole said, because I love it. Coletta said, for a salary. Kim said, to make a difference.
Oh, perfect. So you all just named off a lot of things that are on this slide.
I think they said it before you brought up the slide.
Yeah, awesome.
To
Great.
feel fulfilled.
Yeah, so that sense of purpose or meaningfulness. Think about this. When you work, someone is paying you for your skill and your time. In the very essence of it, that's what it is. So it really does kind of build you up, give you a sense of pride that you're being compensated for your time. So that in that sense of purpose, you know, a lot of us are in these fields because we want to help others. Developing a friendship network, your peers, your coworkers, we're social beings. We develop a lot of these on the job to express your creativity, a passion for what you do. And then obviously we got the medical insurance for some positions and those other perks and the money to help pay those bills. So when I'm talking to folks to other groups that don't have quite the knowledge that you all might have on mental illness or disabilities, I ask them, when we think about these benefits, are they any different for someone that would have a mental illness or substance use disorder or any other type of disability or housing concerns or a justice involved background? They're not any different for any of these folks. Employment has benefits for everyone, and it's been studied and looked at before. In the general population, it's been found that work's beneficial for employees' well-being if there's good quality supervision and there's a positive workplace environment. And repeatedly, over and over again, unemployment has been found to have consistently negative effects. Some of the negative effects of unemployment is the reliance on Social Security benefits, which sometimes aren't a lot. Unemployment can lead to isolation. One can't develop those social networks if you're not out there working on a job with others. For folks that have serious mental illness, employment's been found to increase self-esteem, offer better control over psychiatric symptoms, increase their life satisfaction, and reduce psychiatric hospitalizations. Self-esteem and self-worth are also repeatedly reported as important for our transitional age youth population. SAMHSA's definition of recovery is a process of change through which individuals improve their health and wellness, live a self-directed life, and strive to reach their full potential. So just take a second and think about how employment ties in to that definition. And when we look at SAMHSA's 4 major dimensions of recovery, and I'm not going to read these verbatim, but health is overcoming or managing one's diseases or symptoms. Home is a stable place to live. Purpose and community. Now, employment specifically mentioned in that 3rd dimension, purpose, and that's where SAMHSA says employment has a direct effect on. But I'd argue that employment is incredibly valued for all these dimensions. When we talk about health, it's been studied, as I said before, that employment leads to decreased psychiatric hospitalizations and decreased symptoms. Home, employment can help someone pay for rent or pay for their housing bills. Obviously, the purpose, something that really allows us to be fully engaged in society. And then community, developing those social networks that provide support, friendship, love, and hope. That happens on the job. I know some of you have probably developed wonderful friendships over the course of my career, and mentors, folks that I look up to, folks that I emulate. If I hadn't entered the workforce, I would be missing out on all those valuable relationships. Now, switch gears one more time. We're going to talk a little bit about the main employment program offered by DBH. And it's called Individual Placement and Support, or IPS. Now, here in Missouri, the IPS program is overseen by a partnership between the Division of Behavioral Health and Vocational Rehabilitation. We oversee the implementation and expansion of the program throughout the state. We'll talk a little bit more about the sites in a few later slides. But there's 8 evidence-based principles of IPS. IPS is the only evidence-based practice of support employment for individuals with serious mental illness or mental illness and co-occurring disorders. And there are 8 principles that have been developed over the years and studied and looked at. And I'll go through all 8 of these very briefly. The first one, and often the one that is more difficult for someone to wrap their head around that doesn't have experience with IPS or supported employment, is called zero exclusion. The eligibility for the program is based upon consumer choice. Sometimes interest in employment is so important, it outweighs some other factors. We don't exclude someone on our perceived basis of readiness for employment, or we don't exclude someone based on their diagnosis, or if they're actively symptomatic, or if they have a substance use history, or a justice involved history, or if they have a home or not. If someone wants to work, we're going to meet them where they're at, and we're going to work with them. You know, oftentimes the folks we serve either may have a limited employment history, or it could be their first job. And so when someone takes that step and says, I want to work, it's kind of, they're taking that step into the unknown. And I think that requires a good deal of courage, you know, and we want to make sure that we meet them where they're at and nurture that and work with them. The second point, employment services are closely integrated with mental health treatment services. All this means is our employment professionals are included in the treatment team. They're sitting on the table with everyone else. Their opinions are valued. They are held in the same esteem as any other professional on that treatment team. Employment's not siloed off in a corner somewhere. They're an active member of a team helping support someone. Competitive employment's the goal. We'll talk more about a definition of competitive employment, but basically that means a job that pays the minimum wage or above and is advertised to the public at large. Number 4 is employer contact begins rapidly after consumers enter the program. So what we don't want to happen, remember me talking about how sometimes that takes a little bit of courage for someone to say, hey, I'm going to give this a shot and I'm going to try it. What we don't want to happen is, hey, great, we got this waiting list of about 60 days, but we'll be able to help you then. No, we want to make sure we work with them right away and get them in front of an employer to seize on that spark and to build upon it. Number 5 is systematic job development. This means that those employment professionals, they're out there in their communities, they're talking to their local businesses, They're learning about what those businesses and the supervisors find valuable in employees. What are they looking for right now? What is the pulse of their community? So we want them out there in the community building up a network of employers. Supports are continuous and the team's responsibility. This means that once we help someone get a job, services just don't end there. Sometimes this is where the hard work starts, to help support someone to retain that job and turn it into a meaningful career. That long-term support is important after a job's obtained. Individual preferences are honored is number 7. This one's pretty basic. It basically means if someone tells us what they want to do, that's the type of job career we want to look for. We don't really want to put square pegs into round holes. And it's not just about what type of job that someone wants. It's about what type of environment do they want to work in? What hours do they want to work? What days of the week they want to work? All that's taken into consideration to make a good job match. And finally, personalized benefits counseling is provided. We'll talk a little bit more about benefits near the end of the presentation. But we feel it's very important that someone who's receiving entitlements, such as maybe Social Security disability, that those folks understand how employment can affect that check and make an informed choice of how they want to work, if they want to work their way off, or if they want to kind of manage some of it and retain some cash benefit of the check, or retain their Medicaid insurance if they want to work. There's all kinds of incentives out there for someone to do those types of things and maintain their benefits. And we want them to have that individualized choice in education so they can make that choice. In Missouri, we've got 33 IPS sites. There are 19 agencies overseeing these sites. In the most recent fiscal year, 1,409 individuals received IPS. There's a 50% successful employment rate. Now, to tell you if that's good, bad, or in between, for DBH consumers that are in programs that don't have access to an IPS site, the rate of employment is 18% for them. So you can see the vast difference that IPS makes when it comes to helping someone obtain a career. And our rate right now is higher than the national IPS average. I know that map is a little difficult to see, but that's just a map of all of our sites across the state. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about some other employment programs. So these are programs that aren't IPS, but we still train them on those IPS principles because they are based in evidence. So we have employment services that serve on assertive community treatment teams. We got, I think this is the correct number, it might be off by 1 or 2, but 26 teams that serve adults or transition age youth. We have some that are exclusively adult teams, some that are transition age youth teams. If you want to learn more about ACT, I've got the link right there. Also, we have employment specialists that assist folks finding employment at 13 improving community treatment success sites. Now, this is a program where DBH has partnered with the Department of Corrections, and it's a reentry program for individuals that have mental illness or substance use disorder and a justice-involved background. You can learn more about ICTS at that site. We have recovery community centers across the state, and these provide peer-based community that builds hope and supports healthy behaviors for individuals with substance use disorder. There are 8 sites, and employment support is offered at all 8 of those sites, and there's a link to that site, to those sites as well. And finally, if an agency doesn't have a formalized employment program, there's still a way community support specialists on community psychiatric rehabilitation teams can provide employment services for those folks. It just may not be as in-depth as some of the employment specialists that are serving on an actual employment team. So kind of just an overview real quick of IPS and support employment. It's an evidence-based practice. I've got ipsworks.org right there at the first line where you can go learn more about IPS and the 8 principles and all the data behind it. We focus on person strengths, so we're strength-based. We promote recovery and wellness and use a multidisciplinary team approach. And then again, services are individualized and ongoing. Competitive employment, real quick, circle back to that. That's a job anyone can apply for, rather than a job that's created specifically for someone with a disability. It pays at least minimum wage or the prevailing wage rate for that specific job scope. And there's no artificial time limits imposed by the agency upon it. So basically, again, any job that any of us can apply for. We don't really look at placing individuals in sheltered workshops or enclaves with other folks with mental illness or substance disorder. We're looking at competitive jobs out in the community that anybody can apply for. Now, very quickly, I'm going to move into the resources section of this. And I know you've all probably already received some of these resources throughout this conference. So some of these I'll go over fairly quickly. I know you've already been talking with Voc Rehab. They're a wonderful agency. We are fortunate here in Missouri to have such a strong division of vocational rehabilitation, and they are partners of DBH, and we really value that partnership. But you know, they're the agency that helps folks obtain, maintain, or advance in employment if they have disabilities. Also, I believe you've had the job centers, our workforce development present. I can't say enough about what the job centers do as well. Again, this is a free service for anyone. They offer different types of workshops. There's hiring events there, job fairs. You can get an assessment and evaluation of your skills, and it's no cost. And the website's down there. And again, I'm sure you've already received some of that information. That map's difficult to see. There's little red dots of all your job centers across Missouri. And here's a listing of them. The Skill Up program. This is an employment program offered through Family Support Division, Department of Social Services. This is for folks that receive SNAP, formerly known as food stamps. And it's an employment program available for folks that receive this entitlement. To learn more about Skill Up, the website's at the bottom of the link. Federal Bonding Program is a resource that not a lot of folks know about, and it's really geared more towards individuals that might have a justice-involved background. Think of this as kind of an insurance program for employers. It writes bonds that cover an employer against theft, forgery, larceny, or embezzlement. And it's a very simple process. You just call that number, and the person in Missouri, they pretty much take care of the whole process. They get in contact with the employer to write that bond. So we always want an employer to hire someone based on that person's individual merit. But unfortunately, there's still some stigma out there. So if an employer is a little hesitant to hire someone that might have a mental illness, substance use disorder, and a justice-involved background, offering something like the federal bonding program might move the needle a little bit so that employer could, quote unquote, give this person a chance. And the bonding information is there at the bottom. You probably already heard about the Work Opportunity Tax Credit. This is a federal tax credit given to employers for hiring from certain target groups. And the list I have here is not the entire list. There's a lot more populations that would qualify an employer for a work opportunity tax credit. And these tax credits stack as well. The more folks that I hire from these groups, the more they can take advantage of these federal tax credits. And finally, Missouri DB 101 is your website for all comprehensive Social Security benefit information. You remember when I was talking about IPS and how we want folks to have an understanding of how their Social Security benefits could be affected, or any other entitlement benefit could be affected by work. Well, Missouri DB 101 is a site you could go to if you have little to no knowledge on this, all the way up to if you're a certified benefits professional. There's an online calculator on the site where someone can plug in what their social security amounts are, and then they can plug in their desired hours they want to work and their desired wages they want to make. And it's going to give you a calculation, an estimation of how your social security check is going to be affected by employment. There's a Dispelling the Myths page. And this site's also continually updated for any state or federal laws that could change to affect social security rules. If anything, if you have limited knowledge on benefits planning, I would suggest you at least visit DB 101 and check out the myths page, Dispelling the Myths page. And there's videos on there. They're very brief, short videos. There's several of them, and they talk about things like, what is SSI? What is SSDI? What are work incentives? And they really break down this complex information into easily digestible snippets. So I highly recommend you go there just to learn a little bit about benefits and employment. This is a screenshot of Missouri DB 101. And right there on the right-hand side of this screen, you can see the myths link where it's called Getting Past the Myths, and you're really dispelling those myths. Myth 1, I can't work. Myth 2, if I work, I'll lose SSI, SSDI. Myth 3, if I work, I'll lose my health benefits, and so forth. You can click on those links and it takes you to a little article that tells you how these are myths and how they can be debunked. And actually that link right there at the bottom of this screen will take you directly to that myths page. This is the benefits and work estimator I was telling you about. This is that online calculator where someone can plug in their numbers and determine how their social security check could be affected by employment. There's also a school and work estimator, and this is beneficial for someone that wants to further their education, regardless of their age, or for transitional age youth, this could be something that they would find beneficial. Finally, there is a Ticket to Work helpline that folks can call if they have some more intensive questions about how employment could affect their check. This number links you right up with a community work incentives coordinator. These are folks that are experts in their field when it comes to benefits planning. Now, there's only 2 agencies in Missouri, and they have kind of smaller teams, so they are very overworked. So if you call that number, please just be patient with them. But I know these folks, they are very caring and very knowledgeable on benefits planning. So I always ask at the end, what should you do if you encounter someone that says, hey, you know, I think I want to try work? Well, you encourage them. You know, you let them know it's a possibility. You let them know that, you know, anyone can work and it can really better their lives. And you can educate them with some of the resources that we talked about today and that you probably learned about through the whole conference. And then finally, make those referrals when you need to VOC rehab, or someone's not hooked up with DBH services or departmental health services. Make those referrals as well. So I appreciate you all taking the time today, and I'll leave it now for any types of questions you might have, or if there's anything in the chat I might need to address. I'm sorry, Stacy, Kim, I don't see the chat right now.
Oh, no problem at all. So thank you, Chad, for that lively presentation. He makes it all sound so exciting. I love that. Such great energy for our
employment is exciting.
Speaker. It is. And, you know, when he talked about mentors, I consider Chad one of my mentors. I've learned so much. He and I have worked together on the Disability Benefits 101. The council just paid for a redesign. So now it's mobile friendly. And we just got some new videos just finished this week that show you how to go through that, that estimator, because like Chad said, one of the biggest obstacles, people think they're going to lose their benefits, which is very scary, and that's why they're not working. And so that really gives you a great idea of how the making more money will affect your benefits. So there was a question in the chat from Luke. He asked, like, what is can you explain the similarities and the differences of DBH, which is behavioral health, versus DD, developmental disabilities, side of DMH. So the similarities and differences between DBH versus DD under that umbrella of DMH, which is mental health.
Yeah, very briefly, it's basically, you know, diagnosis is where you're going to kind of draw the line between both sides of the house there. DD, you're talking about developmental disabilities that occur over someone's life, mental, a Down syndrome, borderline intellectual functioning, cognitive impairments. Whereas the division of behavioral health side, we're looking specific at mental illness, such as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, schizoaffective disorder, and substance use disorder. So when you think DBH, think mental illness and think substance use disorder. And that's, there's a lot more to it, but that's it in a nutshell.
Okay. So Luke, hopefully that answered your question, and I'm not seeing any follow-up question from him there. So Chad, I think you're off the hook, and look at that, finishing right on time at 2:30.
Okay, well, I hope some of the information wasn't too redundant, because I know you've had some other great presenters today.
No,
that
it
probably
wasn't.
talked about similar items. So again, I
And there's
appreciate the
so much.
opportunity.
Pardon
Yes.
me.
So I wish you all the best of luck, and thank you all for the time today. If you have any questions, I'm sorry I did not put my contact information up there. I'll drop it in the chat right now. I'll stop sharing, and I'll drop my contact information in the chat.
Great. And remember, these slides and the recording will be sent to everyone. So don't worry, you'll all get to study those great slides that will be available to everyone. So that is it as far as our presenters. I would just encourage anyone, if you have any questions that we didn't cover that you want to put in the chat, so Kim and I can be thinking if there's anything else we need to do for our follow-up with you all. And I am not seeing it. I'm seeing some thank yous, which is great. Please remember to share that partners and policymaking application. Send that out far and wide to anyone who you think would be a great partner. We just appreciate you all so much. I hope that you all will, make sure that you're on the listserv, make sure that you're on our Facebook page, that you're checking out the website for partners. Again, if you need any access to any of those things, please reach out to me. I'm going to put my email here in the chat as well. And that's all that we have today. I'm not seeing any questions or anything. So I think that will be it. Well, thank you all so much. We appreciate your time. Oh, wait, hang on. We do have, Danny, just want to point out that it's important to note that you may lose some of your benefit dollars, but you remain eligible for your benefits. And if you can't work in a month, you automatically receive all those benefits again and immediately. I think that's a really good point, Danny, that it's better to go out and try work and know that they still will allow you to come back and still get benefits. It doesn't make you ineligible. That's a really good point, Danny. Thank you. Okay, well, that's it. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time. And oh, Danny, also, Danny's full of great information. If you receive DD services and DBH services at the same time, you can receive both DD, Developmental Disability Services, and DBH, Behavioral Health Services, at the same time. If your case manager tells you no, kick it up to the next level. Great. Yes, and that's one of the things that we learn in partners in policymaking is how to be advocates for ourselves and others. And as my mom would say, you can always ask, they're not going to punch you in the nose. So it's always worth asking, and reach out to any of these great presenters, reach out to me, reach out to Kim, and we'll do anything we can to connect you to the right person to get that information. All right, that's it. Thank you, partners. Have a great day. Thank you. Bye.